moving into part two of this background on the revolutions, and again, this is very general background. You're going to be reading more about these revolutions on your own and in class. I'm trying to give you a framework of these revolutions and the most important pieces of them. We're going to be looking next at the French Revolution. The French Revolution has many, 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 many causes. And these causes are outlined in great detail. I'll show you in just a second here. But the biggest one is that their government is incredibly old school, called the Ancien Regime. They have a society divided into three estates. You might remember this slightly from thinking about the old medieval system, but you've got the church, the nobility, and everybody else. And everyone else has the same amount of rights, whether they're a wealthy merchant or a pauper. Everyone else, most of the population, they're the only ones who pay taxes. The church and the nobility are tax exempt. And guess what? Not a lot of these people have a ton of money. In addition to that, there's no food. A volcano in Iceland, haha, got that in there, had erupted recently and is thought to cause a huge global cooling at this time. So harvests have failed, and the king, whose responsibility in the past it was to provide bread at a reasonable cost when that type of thing happened, wasn't doing it. Plus, there was a huge glass ceiling. A lot of these everyone else's, or, you know, a small percentage of them, but were wealthy merchants. And even though they had more money than the nobility, they weren't allowed to do things like own land or big houses in the country or be a part of the second estate. This made them angry. So here's a more detailed look. Oh, sorry, this is Louis XVI. He is king when the French Revolution starts, and you can see that he has a lot of opulence here. So, political causes, church and state conflicts, political participation versus absolutism, wanting some political participation, nationalism, um, where the French are kind of starting to come together as and feeling like their Frenchness, intellectual ideas with the Enlightenment, and more education for regular people who are now realizing that maybe they don't have a very good deal. Socially, there's this breakdown of the estate system with the ceiling I was referring to, and people starting to think that your title shouldn't mean everything to you. Also, egalitarian ideas that come from the Enlightenment. Add to this the growth of those people who could be educated and could break down those walls, and starvation. And you have the causes for the French Revolution. Plus, here's the thing. France was severely in need of funds. They needed more money. They had huge debts, partially from helping fund the American Revolution. So Louis had no choice but to try to collect more revenue. The way he had to try to do that was to call a meeting of the Estates General. So the Estates General was 1/3 representatives from the church, 1/3 representatives from the nobility, and 1/3 representatives from everyone else. And guess what? Two groups always voted together to get rid of their taxes or to vote down taxes that were levied at them. The church and the nobility. And that's how everyone else ended up paying all the taxes in France. Problem was that wasn't enough revenue. So the Estates General is called to meet in 1789, and the Third Estate is like, we are not going to take this anymore. And like I said, when the first two estates locked them out, as you saw in the tennis court oath, here, they meet in a handball court and decide that they are going to take over the government. And then They do. They issue the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen eventually in their Estates General. This is kind of a moderate revolution. They allow the king to maintain power, but they start to take hold of more authority. During this time, if you take European history, you'll learn about the Reign of Terror, which is a time when a lot of rich stuff and people who were rich got killed and destroyed in France. And this, like I said, this National Assembly strives for popular sovereignty and equality and individual rights. And you can read all about that. In fact, you will in the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. You'll see that in a lot of ways, this models both the Declaration of Independence and Enlightenment ideas. Then the revolution takes a turn. Part of the reason for this is because of the constant war that France is experiencing. France is not a colony an ocean away. France is a country next to many absolutist states. And they are very worried that France's revolution can bleed into their own. So partially because of all of the hunger from the still not good harvests, partially because of this war and people being conscripted into the army, partially just because not the National Assembly promised a lot but really couldn't deliver on many of those promises. The French Revolution enters the radical phase. And this guy over here institutes the control of this thing called the Committee of Public Safety, and which basically becomes a reign of terror. This is a time everybody thinks about when they think about the French Revolution, with the guillotine and thousands of people dying every day, and Robespierre's what becomes known as the Reign of Terror, where a lot of people who had been friendly to the revolution are now sought out as people who are committing treason. France is still at war with lots of states, but eventually this cult of reason is debunked. This is the time I was talking about in class where everything was divided by 10, like days and weeks and months. So there are 10 days a week instead of 7. They get rid of the whole Sunday thing. They turn the churches into houses of reason. There was a lot of change. And like I said in class, you wouldn't not only know what day it was, you wouldn't know what was going on with your government at all. So France takes a more conservative approach then after the end of the Reign of Terror and the killing of Robespierre with the guillotine, and moves into the Directory. The Directory is a more conservative part of the revolution, but France is still at war and they're very slow to act. So one of the directors, Napoleon, takes over. This leads France into a dictatorial regime. Also, Napoleon takes over basically all of continental Europe, and you know, parts of Africa. He's the one who finds the Rosetta. His troops in his army find the Rosetta Stone and bring that back, so we can read hieroglyphics today. Yay! And he, does the Louisiana Purchase. He's very involved. But his eventual ouster and replacement with another Louis, another absolutist king, leads to subsequent French revolutions. There's a French Revolution in 1830, there's a French Revolution in 1848, etc., etc., etc. Here is a picture of Louis XVI being decapitated by the guillotine, which, as you will learn was actually a mechanism for fairness, so that everyone would be killed the exact same way, and it was supposed to be painless, better than, I guess, being, stretched apart or burned alive like they used to do in the Middle Ages. And you can see all of the army supporting this beheading. Here we see the furthest extent of Napoleon's empire. And yeah, we know that like him going into Russia is what was his downfall. And also his client states. Great Britain, not so down with Napoleon. This is here we have Marie Antoinette, and she's the wife of Louis XVI. She's the one who supposedly said, "Let them eat cake," although she never said that. And this is Olympia de Jure, who issued the Declaration of Rights of Women and Citizen. She was eventually decapitated during Robespierre's purges. And here we have Napoleon. Okay. So the cycle of the regime, you can kind of think of it as a pendulum swinging back and forth from conservative to very liberal and then back again. Or you can think of it more as a circle where you move from the National Assembly to the National Convention. So liberal, radical, more conservative, but with some liberal principles, even more conservative, and then all the way back to absolutists. Again, with a little bit, we'll say like a little bit of liberal principles here. And this is a picture from a subsequent French Revolution. It's one everybody thinks of. This is on the cover of Coldplay's Viva La Vida. And you can see like the influence of the first French Revolution with this guy. This is a sans-culotte, that means without pants, but it's a guy who wears basically without culottes. It was a revolutionist with the revolutionary garb, like what you would wear if you were in support of the revolution. And this is Lady Liberty, like the Lady Liberty that of the Statue of Liberty. And this is this little kid with 2 pistols. So you can see how the revolution got pretty dark and violent and bloody in subsequent times. So take a moment to write out some of the similarities and differences you see between the American and French Revolution. So for example, I would say one of the strongest similarities is that they're both founded in Enlightenment ideas. But the differences here are really extreme. For example, France was absolute monarchy, not a colony like America. France was in Europe, surrounded by hostile states, and America was an ocean away. France was a country full of the ancient regime. I mean, they were very far behind the times. They were very, very conservative, whereas America was more experimental. And you can go on from there. Then we'll come back and we'll be looking at the next 2 revolutions.